A third victim of military violence has been buried in Honduras as protests against the government continues. U.S. President Donald Trump delays mass deportations previously planned for Sunday. Fighting continues in Libya as GNA forces close in around Tripoli's airport. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Doris Polo, and this is From the South. People in Honduras have buried the third victim of military violence since protests calling for the president's resignation have restarted in the country. The latest victim is a 17-year-old who was killed during a demonstration in the city of La Paz as the army follows orders given by President Juan Orlando Hernandez. Our correspondent in Tegucigalpa, Gilda Silvastrucci, has more. Amidst feelings of anger and pain, 17-year-old Eblin Noe Correa was laid to rest by his family. He was killed by military police during a demonstration on Thursday night in La Paz.
I used to whistle at him to call him over, and he'd ask me, "What do you need, Daddy?" They took away my son.
Look at what's happening to Honduras. We have a dictator who's killing us off. I would give anything to have taken the bullet that killed my nephew.
Following a strike by the nation's riot police, President Juan Orlando Hernandez ordered the military to take to the streets. The army officials used live rounds of ammunition to disperse protesters, leaving 3 dead and 21 injured in 24 hours.
What shocked us was how they arrived. They came in like criminals, hid their cars on a dark road, just like when they hire hitmen come to kill somebody. They got out of their cars and started shooting at protesters.
Despite military violence in many communities, people have not been swayed from taking to the streets. They demand that President Juan Orlando Hernandez resign. Meanwhile, protest leaders strongly condemn the actions taken by the military.
We demand that human rights be respected. We call on the UN's Human Rights Commission to condemn these acts. The state is killing us. We are being repressed.
We are seeing a heightened need for the government to repress citizens and maintain power. But what's most infuriating, it's international community's failure to react.
From the streets, protesters say they will continue fighting for citizens' rights and against the privatization of public institutions, in particular health and education.
Teachers and citizens as a whole are going to continue protesting. 10 years after the 2009 coup, Hondurans are advancing their fight. We are not afraid of tear gas or even bullets.
Teachers and health workers' unions have made continuous calls for strike action against what they call a dictatorship. To talk more about the current situation in Honduras, my colleague Estefania Bravo spoke with Luis Hernando Zelaya Medrano, the president of the Liberal Party in Honduras and a former presidential candidate for the 2017 presidential elections.
Well, this shows the weakness of the government of the Juan Hernandez, because they only one way to face the people is by repression, by the use the force of the police and the military. And the root problem, the real problem, the main problem is the uncertainty and ungovernability in the country.
The president has offered a dialogue. How are people reacting to this call, and how do you view the appeals for dialogue?
He does the moral authority to call a dialogue. We failed in the United Nations dialogue last year. We had the opportunity to talk with the government, but they don't have the will to do the right things. So right now, I think he's not the moral authority to call a dialogue in Honduras.
Yeah. Now, Luis, the Catholic Church made a call for people to pray at noon today. What are people praying for, and what role has the Church had within these recent weeks?
The Episcopal Conference in Honduras made a pronouncement who called the people for the reflection of what the situation and violence and corruption and all the things around the real problems in the country. We have to join to the pray for our country. We are very, very concerned about the situation in our country.
Yeah. Luis, let's go back and talk about the election process, which saw President Juan Orlando Hernandez be re-elected in 2017. Was his re-election legal to begin with?
This is the original sin in Honduras, the unlegal re-election. The Constitution don't allow re-election in Honduras. So this is the main problem, the roof on everything in the country. And the fraud, the elections in November 2017 was a fraud, and this is the real problems in our country.
Yeah. Now, lastly, around this time ago, 10 years ago, we saw a coup against former President Manuel Zelaya. Many will be remembering the date in the coming week. What will have to happen for the unrest to end?
Well, we have a lost decade. If you see the education indicators, the poverty, the education, health, every indicator in Honduras, we can see the last decade is a lost decade for us. So we need to reflection for all the actors, politicals, social, church, and everything to rebuild our country. We need to see the future, but in a real dialogue without Juan Hernandez, without the government.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, has concluded her official visit to Venezuela. She met with high-level government officials after her arrival on Wednesday at the invitation of President Nicolas Maduro. President Maduro spoke about the visit on Friday, saying it was a positive one.
I think it was a good visit. She came after we extended an invitation in November of last year. We wanted to establish new working relationships with the Office of the High Commissioner. We wanted to improvise this relationship as it had deteriorated with the previous High Commissioner for Human Rights, who took a political stance against the Bolivarian Revolution. The former commissioner would attend events with the Venezuelan opposition in New York and would not defend our people's rights. So we hope, with these visits, things will ultimately improve.
On the last day of her visit, Bachelet met with President of the National Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello. As her visit came to an end, Bachelet spoke to the press, expressing great concern for the effect of U.S. economic sanctions, saying these are affecting everyday people.
I have great concerns that sanctions imposed this year on oil and gold exports are further worsening the pre-existing economic crisis.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that mass deportations scheduled for Sunday have been delayed for 2 weeks. Taking to Twitter, President Trump says the delay comes at the request of Democratic leaders in hopes that Democrats and Republicans can get together and work out a solution to the asylum and loophole problems at the southern border. Trump finished his tweet saying if no agreement is reached, then deportations start. Immigrant communities across the U.S. had previously been warned about ICE raids planned for Sunday. In other news, Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Dr. Keith Raleigh has slammed the United States for its hypocrisy as it relates to its own immigration issues. This as the U.S. State Department placed the Caribbean island at Tier 2 in its 2019 Trafficking in Persons report. The report gave Trinidad an F grade for failing to screen Venezuelan migrants entering the country for possible human trafficking.
We got an F, they say. Well, if I was marking their paper, what would I give them? They have the same problem that we have. Thousands of migrants rushing your border, wanting to come into your country because they see a greener grass on your side than on their side. That is the #1 political issue in America. Hundreds of thousands of people, and their own people are telling you that those people, some of them are treated like dogs and cattle. Children are dying on the border, some of them in cages. 100 people in a room that was made for 10. The temperature is 41 degrees. And of course, they have a bigger military, they got a bigger security system, they got an army, a navy, an air force, and they got a bigger treasury than Trinidad and Tobago. How have they handled their situation better than ours?
The Prime Minister further noted that Trinidad and Tobago has opened its borders to Venezuelan nationals, registering 15,000 people that are now authorized to work for 1 year. He said Trinidad, as a small twin island state, has done more for migration than the developing world.
Do not feel beaten down by those who will measure you by an F, because we have done more than most countries that manage migrations into their border. Go to Europe, the developed world, and see what happened to Africans who come into southern Europe, out of Africa, into Italy, into Germany, into France. See what the news says about that. We get an F. Ladies and gentlemen, we mark our own paper. This Trinidad and Tobago, we stand on our own strength, on our own principles.
After the break, Colombia's Afro-descendant communities have delivered an official report on parliamentary activity in their lands. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Community councils in Colombia's Valle de Cauca department have collected all available information of paramilitary activity in their lands. They delivered these reports to the Special Jurisdiction for Peace in hopes of establishing just how involved the government is for the armed conflict.
Afro-Colombian communities in Valle del Cauca gave the Special Jurisdiction for Peace 2 reports about paramilitary incursions in their land and about the complicity of the state in attacking communities between the years 2000 and 2005.
This report shows the extent of paramilitary presence in our community. They have massacred, displaced, and raped our people. But what shocked us was the complicity of the state, in particular the 3rd Valley Brigade, who operated with paramilitary leaders. We got to see how they singled out our leaders so they could be murdered.
This report by communities unveiled political and social interests that have led to countless massacres and forced displacement.
With this report, we want to stop the complicity of third parties, such as large companies that operate in the north of the valley. They sponsor and pay off paramilitaries so they can murder and displace us from our lands. This is a political issue. It even involves the governor of Cauca and his links to paramilitaries.
Courage is what identifies these communities. In the face of illegal armies, state abandonment, and continued murders, they insist on their fight for truth and justice.
Simply put, these are the same structures, the same ideologies and interests from 20 years ago to justify what was the most severe attack against the population. Our challenge is to showcase the demands of communities so that laws can be changed and impunity can finally end.
In just 1 year, the Special Jurisdiction for Peace has received over 200 reports on the victims of the armed conflict from at least 20 departments across Colombia, a fact that proves socio-political violence is widespread and systematic.
We have discovered how these crimes are being repeated in many places, behaviors that repeat at a national level, paramilitaries working together across territories and sharing their methods.
The process of amassing reports from the almost 8 million victims of the armed conflict will last 2 years. After this period, the Special Jurisdiction for Peace will have the colossal task of identifying those responsible for the violence and finally provide truth, justice, and reparations for victims.
Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has said he continues to support his Justice Minister Sergio Moro even after shocking revelations that he worked with prosecutors to ensure former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva would be imprisoned. Bolsonaro said Moro's job was outstanding and has become a legend in fighting corruption. This comes after The Intercept showed messages and audios that revealed prosecutors didn't have evidence against Lula, but continued his persecution due to Moro's continuous pressure. On Friday, we were joined by Geo Romano, professor of international relations in Sao Paulo, who spoke on Bolsonaro's continued support for Judge Moro.
Well, we have to understand that the information revealed by Intercept was, of course, always a public secret. Everybody knew that Moro had a clear political intention. However, his supporters and the supporters of Bolsonaro and those who voted for Bolsonaro, most of them, the majority, thinks that he did the right thing. So that the means, the goal justified the means. And this, of course, hasn't changed. So the revelations, they are very important because they give clear evidence that what the Lula supporters always said is really can be proven. But it doesn't change the support, or it changed only marginally the support for Moro, who is still a hero for a great part of the society. And that's what Bolsonaro knows. So he is giving support to Moro because he himself depends also on the same basis.
The state funeral for Jamaica's 5th Prime Minister, Edward Seaga, will take place on Sunday. He will be honored with a 19-gun salute in keeping with the high national office that he held. The late Seaga will then be laid to rest at the National Heroes Park. Jamaica's Office of the Prime Minister has advised that persons in attendance are expected to behave appropriately and respectfully in both sound and movement as the gun salute commences. Seaga served as Prime Minister from 1980 to 1989. He lost his battle to cancer on his 89th birthday on May 29th. Edward Seaga shaped Jamaica's post-independence politics and cultural life. He was the only remaining member of the generation of leaders who drafted the Constitution when the Caribbean island gained independence from Britain in 1962. His political career began in the late 1950s, and he won a parliamentary seat in 1962. In Mauritania, voters have started casting their ballots in what may be the first democratic transition of power since the country's independence in 1960. Current President Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz initially seized power in a coup in 2008, but has agreed to step down and abide by a 2-term limit. More than 1 million people are eligible to vote in Saturday's election, as 6 candidates are in the running for the presidency. Election results are expected next week. Members of Libya's government of national accord have advanced on a former airport in Tripoli in the latest development of the battle for the capital. Since fighting started in April, the former airport road has been one of the main avenues of fighting between the GNA and General Khalifa Haftar's forces. But recently, the assault has stalled due to resistance from local armed groups aligned with the UN-recognized government. Haftar fighters say they are trying to free the capital from militias, which they accuse of destabilizing Libya since the fall of the late President Muammar Gaddafi in 2011.
Since the early hours of this morning, we advanced from 3 different locations around the airport, and we are currently awaiting instruction from our noble leaders to advance and capture the whole airport.
Protesters in Sudan organized night gatherings to continue their fight for a civilian-led government. Despite power outages and increased security by the ruling Transitional Military Council, protesters in Jabra district protest leaders called for overnight gatherings. The military has also cut access to internet services in the wake of a crackdown of where at least 61 people were killed. Roadblocks were also set up by citizens to secure the entrances at the meeting points.
People are more aware, and many have joined us after seeing what happened. In the past, there were people who disappeared and others who were afraid of the regime's horrors, of bombs and gunshots, to the extent that many people were afraid to walk in the streets. However, people have now seen the good from the bad, and which is the right path to take as their consciousness has awakened. We will keep going in God's will.
Thousands of people took to the streets of Senegal to protest oil contracts many see as fraudulent. The demonstration follows accusations of corruption against the president's brother. Aliou Sall is said to have received $250,000 from a Romanian businessman linked to the oil market. Protesters are demanding transparent management of their natural resources.
We are here to say no to everything that's going on in this country with regard to the issue of oil and gas, of Senegal's natural resources, how contracts are negotiated behind closed doors at the expense of the Senegalese people. That's why we're here, to renegotiate these contracts and ensure justice is free and transparent in this country.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, the U.S. president has announced new sanctions on Iran. Don't go away. Welcome back. Tensions between the United States and Iran remain high as the U.S. president announced on Friday that he called off a military strike that could have killed 150 people. For their part, Iranian authorities have said they would respond firmly to any U.S. threat. The U.S. military strike would have come as retaliation after Tehran shut down a U.S. drone which invaded its airspace. Following his announcement, Trump added that he's open to talks with Tehran, but is also ready to impose more economic sanctions on the Middle East nation.
As you know, we have about as strong a sanction grouping as you could possibly have on any country, but we're putting additional sanctions on. They're going on slowly and in some cases actually pretty rapidly, but additional sanctions are being put on Iran.
On Friday, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Aerospace Division presented the wreckage of the U.S. drone Iran shut down on the country's state media. Tehran said that it is not looking for war, but that it will defend its territory if necessary. Iran recovered the wreckage of the aircraft in its waters, but said that it sent 2 warnings to the United States before firing. Shifting gears now, a 7-story building collapsed in Cambodia, killing at least 7 people, while many others remain missing. At least 21 people have been injured as the search for survivors continues. The still under construction building in the coastal city of Sihanoukville was owned by a Chinese company. 3 people have been arrested in relation to the collapse: the building owner, the head of the construction firm, and the contractor. We continue with our coverage of the Cricket World Cup in the United Kingdom. On Saturday, India beat Afghanistan by 11 runs at the Hampshire Bowl, defending a modest 224. Mohammad Shami's 4-over 40 helped India bowl out Afghanistan for 213 in 49.5 overs. Mohammad Shami took a dramatic hat-trick that denied Afghanistan a historic and shock of the World Cup victory over India. India looked in danger of losing when Afghanistan struck a boundary off the first ball of the final over to move within 12 runs of victory. The defeat eliminates Afghanistan, while India moves above England in 3rd place. We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.